Good morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, we're sharing more details about an amazing historical find. 6 months after an archaeological survey team identified the wreckage of the schooner Clotilda, what is considered and believed to be America's last slave ship. The Clotilda's remains were found in a backwater and muddy stretch of the Mobile River off of 12 Mile Island in a graveyard of ships. The Mobile-built and locally owned schooner was part of a wager, the bet to smuggle human cargo into the U.S., even though importing people to enslave had been banned 50 years earlier in 1808. The year, 1860. After leaving Africa's west coast and crossing the Atlantic, the Clotilda entered the Mobile River, carrying more than 100 men, women, and children. The wooden vessel was abandoned, set afire, burned to not be seen again for nearly 160 years. Now, since that 19th century fateful historical date, the former captives and their descendants have shared their story of the Clotilda, its journey through the Mid-Atlantic Passage to Mobile Bay, and its Mobile River arrival and landing. Then building a life and community after slavery in a place they call AFRICATOWN. For the many who listened to the descendants, they wondered though and wanted to know where was that 86-foot ship. There was documentation, of course, of the Clotilda being built, and the ship's captain, William Foster, recorded the journey in his journal. In the spring of 2019, an archaeological survey team led by James Jim Delgado, Dr. Delgado, identified the wreckage of the Clotilda. The 19th century wooden schooner would show itself reappearing to the team's 21st century technology. Dr. Delgado is an authority in maritime archaeology, a world-renowned archaeologist, in fact, historian, journalist, educator, and museum director. His career spans nearly 5 decades of passionately investigating the past, ensuring discovery and history worldwide. Dr. Delgado joined us at Five Rivers Delta Resource Center on the Causeway to talk about the Clotilda, its significance, and its reappearance.
No one person found Clotilda. In fact, I don't think Clotilda was ever truly lost. One of the things that we've noted is that even at the time, we believe people knew exactly where it was. Understanding, of course, that all of the government officials who searched for it would in short time become Confederates. Many of them were themselves slave owners. And so the real question is, was it truly being hidden, or was it merely being put under the water so that it was not directly physically there to confront the government officials who could say, I looked and I didn't find it? And to that end, I think there were people who through the years knew exactly where it was. And the clearest evidence of that is the fact the wreck has been dynamited, and according to historian John Sledge, that happened decades ago. The Mayer family did it. They told him to recover some of the value of the copper and some of the iron in the wreck. And that's exactly what we found. So it never truly was lost. It merely had to be found by an exhaustive process of looking at a variety of wrecks that are there because it sits in a ship graveyard. And that approach had to be a careful scientific one because this is a very important ship.
And of course, we'll hear more from Dr. James Jim Delgado throughout the program as he shares how research, science, and forensic archaeology was used to identify Clotilda's wreckage in the midst of a ship graveyard, as he mentioned, in the muddy bottom of the Mobile River. And here with us this morning to share more about the captives, their legacies, today's descendants, and community members who have embraced the historical importance of this amazing story. Darron Patterson, the Clotilda Descendants Association acting president. He's a descendant of Clotilda captive Polly Allen. And U.S. Navy Chief Petty Officer Jason Lewis. His organization, VETS, Visualizing Everyone That Serves, is a 501c3 that brings in military volunteers and assistance. Perspectives continues in just a moment. Welcome back to Perspectives. Our guest, Darron Patterson, the Clotilda Descendants Association acting president. He's also a descendant of Clotilda captive Polly Allen. Thanks for joining us today.
How are you today?
I'm great, and great to have you here to talk about this incredible historical finding or reappearance and rediscovery of the ship Clotilda. Darren, go back with me, because a lot of folks, and you being a descendant, over the years have talked and shared about it, and not quite the impact of what has happened since 2018. Mm-hmm. And thanks to Ben Raines, who brought it back to the forefront in awareness and understanding and the possibility at that time. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, now the ship has reappeared.
Correct.
What has it been like for the last few years for you prior to Ben and then now Dr. Delgado and the reappearance of the ship?
Well, for the last few years, for me, it really wasn't that hectic because, Eric, I really wasn't involved that much. I knew about it. You know, we've always heard that there was a ship, but I really wasn't involved. My involvement actually began, my deep involvement began when they found the ship.
Why so? Why did it happen then?
Because the descendants, we needed, at that moment, we realized we needed to organize ourselves. We realized that this thing was coming, and it was coming very fast. So I was getting phone calls. You have to do something. You have to do something. You have to get this done together. So I called the only elected official right now, who was Theodore Arthur from the previous group. And I said, Theodore, what are we going to do? And Theodore says, you know, I got so much going on. You take it and run. And I took it and ran. And I involved Jocelyn Davis, who was with the group, and we put our group together, got our 501c3, hired an intellectual property attorney, organized ourselves, and for the last few months we have a steering committee that, I'll tell you about that a little later. Ironically, the steering committee is made up of a Kibi, a Lewis, and an Allen. The same three leaders of AFRICATOWN were a Kibi, a Lewis, and an Allen.
In the beginning years of it becoming a community.
Years of it.
Before you go there, go back a second. Now, why before 18 and the re-excitement had you not been excited about it?
Eric, let me tell you something. My folks, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, they never embraced where we came from. It was more about where we were going, hence Mobile County Training School. Mm-hmm. Mobile County Training School was built to teach the young men, the young Africans, how to be viable men and viable women. There were a lot of people, I really believe in my own mind, they were ashamed of where we came from, ashamed of how we got here.
Right.
Not ashamed of where we came from, but ashamed of how we got here. And they wanted the young people to focus on where you're going.
Moving ahead.
Moving ahead. Mobile County Training School was built for that purpose, to teach us how to go forward, not look back. I have a necklace with the Sankofa. Sankofa has the bird with the ball in his mouth, he's looking back, and it's talking about looking back to not forget where you came from, with the ball in his mouth being the future. And that's really exactly what my folks wanted, and I'm sure other folks.
Right. So what did you feel when this came about again with Ben and the possibility that had been found? What happened to you?
It was just exciting, man. Man, it's been exciting because things have been moving fast and quick, and people are moving here, and you go in there and people are asking you this and they're asking you that, and there's a microphone here, there's a camera crew there, there are people here, and what do you think? And I'm like, let me just sit down for a minute and hold it together. Right. But I've got a good group of people around me in the association, in the Descendants Association. We've been able to do some things very quickly. Including that event at the water.
Absolutely. I think we showed some of the video of that.
Absolutely, the Blue Way event.
Yes.
And that's the National Park Service is very involved in that. Liz Ensor Smith, she's very involved in that. The groups, we have not only just one group calling the shots out there. We have basically 4 groups of people. The Mobile County Training School Alumni Association, that's Mr. Anderson Flynn, who leads that. The ACDC, AFRICATOWN Development Corporation, Cleon Jones leads that. Chess, Joe Womack. Joe Womack is gold. He's the best. He's the environmental watchdog, for lack of a better word, to make sure that no more international paper companies come into the area and spew stuff in the air.
Right.
And then,
corporate
of course,
responsibility.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And then we have the Descendants, our group, and we make sure that we try to stay together as much as we can, us 4 groups, to make sure we share information and do things we need to do for the benefit of the community.
All right, holding that point, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to bring Chief Jason Lewis in here as well, one of the groups who his nonprofit a part of contributing and wanting to be a part. All right, Perspectives continues in just a moment. As we go to break this morning, we'll hear again from Dr. James Jim Delgado. He shares his thoughts about the work to determine the Clotilda was on the Mobile River's dark and muddy bottom and its use as a slave ship.
When you confront the physical reality of something like slavery and a slave ship, this being not only the last to have known to have come, but also one that's likely going to be one of the better preserved with the actual evidence of the crime, they're sealed in the mud. So it had to be done carefully. So the real task wasn't finding it, it was there. The real question then was how to sort it out. So that river is an important archaeological area, but in the midst of it is the wreck of Clotilda. So what then had to follow after the survey work was systematically looking as scientists, carefully examining all of this evidence, not to prove that something was, but to try very hard to prove that it wasn't. And so in this case, and understanding that what happened with Clotilda was a crime, it was a federal crime, it was a felony, punishable by death, you tackle it in that spirit, which we would do anyway as archaeologists. And so that's why it's taken some time to get to the point where we can say the evidence has led us to this logical conclusion that this wreck is Clotilda.
And welcome back to Perspectives. Darren Patterson, our guest this morning, along with Navy Chief Jason Lewis. And he is here this morning representing the role that he has seen in this whole project of the AFRICATOWN community and the Clotilda story, as well as seeing the importance of bringing the U.S. Navy to the point of being involved in this as well. We thank you for joining us this morning as well, and of course for your service. Chief, why don't you tell us as we talk about it, how did this involvement for you, how was it developed? How did it happen when you got to see and hear the story and wanting to be a part of this Clotilda story?
Well, the Clotilda was a byproduct of the neighborhood that I grew up in. That is, the story of it was a part of the community that I had already known. I just hadn't known about the actual Clotilda. Growing up, grandparents, mom, both sides of the family grew up in that neighborhood, and so I grew up in that inner city that was attached to the mainstay of Plateau. I knew.
What were the stories that what had you heard?
Well, I've heard small tidbits of it throughout the years, but you know, as a kid, as a teenager, you worried about football, video games, and everything else. So when initially I was restationed down in Pensacola, Florida on the base, I took some sailors and we volunteered over in the community because it was near and dear to my heart to come back to my community and do some volunteer work. And coincidentally, the same Saturday that my commanding officer gave me the thumbs up to go and do it, they had the meeting that said they had found a Clotilda. So literally, while the meeting was going on in my old woodshop class in Mobile County Training School, you have sailors from all different backgrounds and diversities in the neighborhood doing a community cleanup, and I actually walked up on the story of the Clotilda.
My goodness. Now, how did you feel that you wanted to get the Navy involved in this? How did you approach them with what you were seeing as something you'd like to contribute?
Well, it's natural for the Navy to get involved and engaged in any type of humanitarian aid going on around the world, from the USS Comfort, from any ship that you see floating on the water, Katrina. Those things come natural for us as sailors, but it was near and dear to my heart, obviously, because I'm back home in Mobile, Alabama, and I had the support from the schoolhouse that I'm an instructor at. And the sailors, they bought in and said, hey, Chief, we'll go out there with you. You have people from all walks of life, engineers, ITs, cryptologists, and all of them said, hey, put that uniform to the side. I just want to go get my hands dirty and do something. It's
kind of an ironic story when you think about it. They were running from the U.S. Navy when they came back from Africa, from Benin, and
almost got caught.
Yeah, almost got caught. And so now, ironically, the U.S. Navy is now helping in bringing the history back.
Yeah, well, I hope it comes full circle, because it's a story of the water, and our whole mission is to be forged by the sea. And growing up in Mobile, Alabama, you leave with values like family, community, and unity. Joining the Navy, honor, courage, and commitment married perfectly with that. And over the past 21 years of service, I've had the opportunity to do and see some great things, and now to be able to come back to that same community, have the approval and a thumbs up from the United States Navy to bring in resources, and some of the awesome sailors that I've worked with, it's just been phenomenal.
That is a great story, and you've been very successful in your career in the U.S. Navy as well, attaining the rank of Chief Petty Officer, so we congratulate you on that as well. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about what's happening now with the community and the goals and dreams that you all have in bringing all of this to fruition to the next point. Perspectives continues in just a moment. Now, as we go to break, maritime archaeologist Dr. James Jim DELGADO tells us how special a ship Clotilda was.
Clotilda was basically practically a custom-built car, because when it was constructed in Mobile in 1855, Clotilda was built by guys who wanted to really open up the lumber trade, to find other avenues to make some money in addition to the cotton and the plantations. Forest products, lumber in particular, and you needed a ship that had a big hold that could carry a lot of lumber. Most schooners built in the Gulf at that time didn't have a big deep hold. They had a narrow, shallow one because, as anybody knows that sailed Mobile Bay, it's shallow. A deep water ship doesn't really work. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't have them here, but those were generally from up north, and they'd come down and they were generally controlled by northern syndicates. So if you're somebody like Captain Foster, here in Mobile in 1855, you want to get a piece of that pie. You want to build your own ship. And so he built it in that way. And we know that not just from the records that say it was 86 feet long by 23 feet with a hold that was 6 feet 11 inches deep. It's the tonnage at 120 tons, which isn't a weight, but for those of us ship nerds, that's the carrying capacity, and that has to be accurately measured because that's how the government taxes. So we had to go through over 1,500 records of ships. And ultimately, without going through all the calculations, only 8 Gulf-built schooners in that entire century had size and tonnage, and only one was 86 feet by 23 feet with a nearly 7-foot depth of hold at 120 tons, and that was Clotilda. So when you get to a wreck on the bottom that meets those characteristics, and then you see, as the records for its insurance, because it's one of the rare ships ever insured in and out of here, it's built of the right wood. White oak frames or ribs, southern yellow pine planking. It's nailed together with wooden pegs called tree nails, but it's also put together with pure iron fasteners. And that's exactly what we found as we worked and sampled. But then you're also looking at other things. What's the construction like? Is it of the period? Everything began to match, including the fact that Captain Foster had left a few clues. I then burnt my schooner and sank her in 20 feet of water. Well, the deepest part this wreck is in 20 feet of water. And this wreck has clear signs of burning as well. We recovered fasteners, just a few out of a number, which have briquettes basically left from those white oak frames that burned in intense heat as the upper works were consumed as Captain Foster set fire to Clotilda in the marsh to get rid of the direct physical evidence, but again, doing so essentially in plain sight.
And welcome back to Perspectives. Dr. James Jim DELGADO talking about the specifics of how all this came about. And it brings chills, doesn't it, when you hear the information?
It brings chills, and also Dr. DELGADO, I love listening to him because sometimes you go, what is he talking about? He talks scientist.
But he paints a good picture,
a great picture.
An incredible picture. And I wanted to mention, we shot this down at Five Rivers because that backdrop behind him hasn't changed since 1860. Yeah. We're looking at the Delta, so the Polly Allen and others, that's what they saw when they came in here.
That's what they saw.
Where are we going now, since you've got some incredible support from the U.S. Navy and, of course, the things that Chief Lewis is doing with that relationship, and you mentioned the other organizations and where you all are coming together now. So what are we going to see next happen with the Clotilda story and AFRICATOWN?
Well, what's happening right now, getting back to Dr. DELGADO, we're dotting I's and crossing T's, from the Alabama Historical Commission to whomever
they now have
is involved.
protection of the ship
Yes,
for you, so
yes.
no one will
Yes.
pillage that.
Yes, and last week I was told that there's a possibility you can put a cofferdam. A cofferdam is where you sink a big tube over the site, pump the water out, and you can actually be down in there surrounded by water doing excavation
Doing
work.
the work, yeah.
Dr. Delgado said that it may be 10 years before this thing is done. So in the meantime, what we have to do is understand how we're going to bring AFRICATOWN back to where it needs to be. And that's what's going to come next. The AFRICATOWN Design Competition. Vicki Howell is leading that thing, where noted architects from all over the world are going to submit their designs for what they believe AFRICATOWN should look like. As far as the descendants are concerned, we are responsible for what the museum is going to look like, telling the story, preserving the story and the legacy of those Africans on that ship.
Now, how soon will the museum, because that's something that you've got some major funding already in place for, correct?
Not in place, but we're close.
Okay. With the Welcome Center, is that tied together?
No. Welcome Center will be the Welcome Center.
Okay.
Museum, something different.
Okay.
And we've already been in touch with curators from Tuskegee University, museum people from other places who've done Black History museums. And now, as we get ourselves together, the descendants, we'll start talking about what should this building look like? How should the story be told? And so we've got work to do, but we got a lot of work to do.
All right.
Yeah.
How do you see the Navy playing a role in this, Chief Lewis?
No, exciting because some of the mentorship that's already going on through working with some of the organizations like Keep Mobile Beautiful, Anderson Flynn, Joe Womack, the mentorship with the school. They have a dive program that actually starting in the community, and doing the neighborhood cleanups will be something that instills more pride in the overall outlook of things. So I'm excited to see the Navy come in and do what we already do, and that's make a better place of this nation.
That is awesome. And when you look at pulling your groups together now, you've had some success here recently with everyone coming together to seeing the big picture.
Absolutely. And that's what needs to be done. This is big, Eric.
It is.
This is huge. This is bigger than almost anything that's happened here. And we need to get people to understand the mindset you need to be in to deal with what's coming. There are things that are coming, and we have to be organized, and we have to be on point. We all have to be going in the same direction. We cannot have any confusion, any hidden agendas, and anytime you have more than one personality involved, you're going to have issues.
Right. We got people.
Yeah, they're people.
Yeah, people
you're going to have
people.
issues. So now what we're working on is making sure that everybody has a single focus, and that is the survival of AFRICATOWN, the prosperity of AFRICATOWN, the preserving of the legacy of those people on that ship, and getting that thing out of the water.
Well, that was one of the things that Dr. Delgado did share about the time frame and, of course, that part, but a lot of other work to be done. And, of course, we thank you all for sharing that with us today. And, of course, there's information available at the organization's website. If you'd like to learn more about the Clotilda and the history of AFRICATOWN, you can call the Clotilda Descendants Association at the number you see there on the screen. And you can also check out their website at clotildastory.com. The Clotilda Descendants Association contact information all right there for you. Well, we thank you so much for being a part of this today, and
thank you.
We look forward to keeping even more abreast of what's taking place. It's only been 6 months since that May date, and of course we'll be keeping that information before the public as well. Thank you both, Chief Lewis as well as Darren Patterson, for being a part of this today. Thanks for joining us here on Perspectives, of course, as we discuss those important issues and seek solutions. Don't forget, you can drop us information here if you'd like to be a part of the program. I'm Eric Reynolds. Have a great week.